Okay, so the first thing we're going to do today is we are going to write linear equations in standard form. So previously we were writing equations in the form y equals mx plus b. So we're going to review what standard form is today. And then we also have to identify values of the variables. We're going to create linear equations in slope-intercept form by using the coordinates of 2 points. And then we're also going to create equations in point-slope form using 2 points on the line or a slope and the point on the line. Okay, so there is going to be some content that's reviewed from Algebra 1, and then there's a few things that are going to be a little bit different. Okay, so when you read over this, there are going to be restrictions here. So I want you to highlight any restrictions you see on the variables, and then we're going to organize those below. Okay, and if you need to buy a highlighter, if you have some up front, you can help yourself. Okay, so it says that you can write an equation in standard form. It's ax plus by equals c. Okay, so standard form, what we're going to be using today is ax plus by equals c. And they do use capital letters, so we're going to do the same. Okay, now the first thing they tell you about these values, it says where a is greater than or equal to 0. So we're going to interpret what that means. If a is greater than or equal to 0, what does that mean a is? Positive. Okay, so a has to be positive. Okay, so your a value has to be positive. Okay, it says a and b are both not 0. Okay, so a and b are not equal to 0. Okay, and then a, b, and c are integers with a greatest common factor of 1. Okay, so first we just have to remember what integers are. Okay, if they tell you it's an integer, that means it's a positive or negative whole number. So that means no decimals, no fractions. Okay, and that includes 0, but remember they both can't be 0. Okay, so no decimals or fractions. Okay, and then if the greatest common factor is equal to 1, okay, if the GCF is equal to 1, what that means is not divisible by any value besides 1. Okay, so if you had like 2, 4, 6 as your A, B, and C, 2 goes into all of them. Okay, if you had 3, 12, and 15, 3 goes into all of them. Okay, so you would have to divide to bring that down. Okay, so we're going to write each equation in standard form, and that means we have to include all of these rules. Okay, a is positive, a and b both can't be 0. We have positive or negative whole numbers. The GCF is 1. Okay, and then after that, it does say to identify your A, B, and C. Okay, so the first thing I like to do, and you don't always have to do this step first, but I think it's helpful, is to have it so it's ax plus by equals c. So see how the x is already on the right side of the equation, the correct side, which is the left side. Okay, now we just have to move over the y term. So it's negative 0.2x minus 2.1y equals negative 0.19. Okay, so I'm also just going to write down like the steps I'm doing. So my first step is to always get it in this form. Ax plus by equals c. Okay, and then the next thing I'm going to check is that a is greater than or equal to 0, and a, b, and c are integers. Okay, so that's what I'm going to check for. So right now, a is not greater than or equal to 0, so I'm going to change that. Okay, I also need to make these not decimals. So in order to make these things happen, what we're going to do is we're going to use multiplication. Okay, so we are going to multiply to make sure you satisfy the conditions that we've outlined. Okay, do you guys have any ideas of what we can multiply to do both of those things in one step? Yeah. Yeah, why negative 10? Yeah, good. So do you guys see how all these decimals are in the tenths place? Okay, if they were in the hundredths place, we can multiply by 100. If they're in the tenths place, we're going to multiply by 10. Okay, so multiply by 10 to transform your decimals. Yeah, we're gonna multiply by negative. Okay, and multiply by -1 to make a greater than or equal to 0. Okay, again, when you're doing your homework, you don't have to write this out, but I noticed like some people are not writing out all of those things, and then we're confused about why we went from one step to the next. Okay, so for your notes, I really do want you to have this. That way, like we're working through something together, I like to refer back to it so you guys can see that. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to multiply by -10, because 10 times -1 is -10. Okay, and if you put this behind it, because it's negative, you should put it in parentheses so it's not a -10. Okay, and we'll do that side first. So the 10 moves the decimal, the negative is going to make it positive, so this would be 19. Okay, a negative times a negative is going to be a positive. Okay, all we're doing is we're moving this decimal one place, so that's going to become 2x. So when you multiply by 10, it moves the decimal one place. So here we would have 21y. Okay, and then the last thing I'm going to check for is the GCF equal to 1? Okay, which just means, is there a number that goes into 2, 21, and 19? No. Okay, so then yes, if the answer is yes, then this is going to be your final answer along with identifying A, B, and C. Okay, so your A value is 2, your B value is 21, your C value is 19. Okay, and then you have that in standard form. Okay, and just so you know, on your notes, I did give you some more complex examples, so ones where you had to manipulate them. Okay, so again, first step, all we're going to do is get this in the proper form. So you have x, you have y, and then you have your constant term. So when you are doing your first step, we can rearrange things on one side, that's fine. Okay, so you're going to have negative 3/7 x. Make sure the negative goes with it. Whatever's in front, it sticks with. 2/5 y. And then I'd have to move this over, okay? And I'm fine if your first step is just writing it out like this. Okay, you don't have to show me the subtraction on each side. Okay, now, when you are trying to get rid of a series of fractions, okay, that do not have a common denominator, what you need to do is multiply by the common denominator. But remember, we are doing this without a calculator. So the common denominator of 7, 5, and 9 is just 7 times 5 times 9. Okay, so it would be 5 times 7 times 9. Now you could multiply that out, right? You could do 35 times 9. We'd have 45, 27 plus 4, 315. So you can multiply both sides by 315, okay? But you're going to end up doing some cancellations. So when you're multiplying, I'm fine if you multiply by 5 times 7 times 9. Okay, when you do that, okay, when you multiply each side by that value, 5 times 7 times 9, on this side, we're going to have to distribute. Okay, and I want you to just trust me for a minute because I know it can be a little bit scary. All we're going to do is multiply by this first, and then we'll get rid of the negatives in a second. So it's 5 times 7 times 9 times negative 3 over 7x. Okay, will you just write this out with me, please? And then we're going to do 5 times 7 times 9 times 2/5 y. And then we're going to put exactly what I put there, negative 4/9, 5 times 7 times 9. Okay, and I'm just going to give you a minute to write that out so you can all be listening for the next step. Okay, so the reason why we're setting it up like this is because when you're doing this without a calculator, we wouldn't want to do 315 times 3 divided by 7. But what we can do here is if I set it up like factors, the 7 is going to cancel out with the 7. And then all I have to multiply together here is 45 times negative 3. Okay, and so to do that, you can just do 45 plus 45, which probably did that a lot in geometry, right, with angles. So 45 and 45 is 90, 90 and 45 is 135, so I have negative 135x. Okay, for the next one, I can cancel out the 5 and the 5. And so this just becomes 63 times 2. Doubling numbers, we can absolutely do that in our head, right? 63 and 63 is going to be what? Yep, 126. Okay, so 60 and 60 is 120, 3 and 3 is 6, and then I have my y. All right, you guys want to try the last one on your own and put it there? so we can cancel out the 9s. So now I have 35 times 4. If you're multiplying something by 4, you're just doubling it twice. What's 35 times 2? 70. What's 70 times 2? 140. And because you have a negative and a positive, this is negative. Now, I decided to do this in 2 steps because I didn't want to overwhelm you, but now we want to make sure that the A value is negative. Okay, so you can either multiply both sides by -1, or you can divide both sides by -1. So to make A is greater than or equal to 0, we'll just divide by our negative. We get 135x minus 126y equals positive 140. Okay, and then your A value is going to be 135, your B value negative 126, your C value 140. Okay, and because we use the LCD here, we shouldn't have any other common factors. So our GCF should be 1. Okay, like 5 would go into these two, but not this one, so that doesn't matter. 2 would go into these two, but not 135, so that's not going to matter either. Okay. All right. Now, example 2 is something that you have done in both Algebra 1 and Geometry. So you're just writing each equation in slope-intercept form, identifying the slope and the y-intercept. Okay, so these should go very quickly for us. So to get the y by itself, that's what you want. Slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b. Okay, your m is your slope. The b is the y-intercept. We also reviewed that when we were graphing. Okay, so you have 2y is equal to negative 10x plus 16. The x is going to go in front. Now, when you're deciding, or when you're dividing that whole side by 2, you're dividing both of these by 2. So negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. 16 divided by 2 is 8. Okay, and it says identify the slope and the y-intercept. So m is negative 5. And then if you can put the y-intercept for this. Okay, and it's fine if you write the slope as m. All right, so why don't you guys go ahead and do part B. All right, let's see how it went. You had some fractions here. Okay, and so your first step was moving over the x term. You have negative 1/3 y. So if you're trying to get y by itself, what are we doing to both sides? Yes, multiply by negative 3. So multiply by the reciprocal. Okay, that's going to be a lot simpler than dividing by negative 1/3, but it is the same thing. So when you are multiplying, just remember, if you're multiplying a whole number by a fraction, you multiply the whole number by the numerator. So what's negative 3 times negative 4? 12. So this is 12 over 5x minus 9. Okay, so then we know our slope is 12/5, and our y-intercept is negative 1. All right, so now we are going to relate this to a contextual problem about kayaking. So it says the linear equation y minus 12x equals 25 describes the cost to rent a kayak at the East Bay Paddle Company, where x is the number of hours. I always like to highlight what it represents. X is the number of hours a person uses the kayak. Y is the total cost of the rental. What we have to do is write an equation in slope-intercept form. Okay, then we're going to interpret the parameters of the equation in context of the situation. Okay, so we're going to be doing multiple things here. Step 1 is to write this equation in slope-intercept form, which I'm confident you can do without me. Y minus 12x equals 25. We would just have to add 12x to both sides to put that in the proper form. Okay, now when you are doing the interpretation, we're going to use what we know about the y-intercept and the slope. Okay, so your y-intercept is 25. Your slope is 12. So your y-intercept is always your starting value or your initial value. Okay, so 25 in this concept represents what? So it's always going to be an initial value. And it says, y is the total cost of the rental. What do you think? Yeah, your base cost of renting your kayak, right? So $25 is the base cost. Renting kayak. Okay, and the 12 is with the x, so the 12 represents what? Yes, okay, so the hourly rate, right? So it's $12 per hour where you're using the kayak. Okay, so you have your initial value, and then this is your increasing value. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to write that as an interpretation. So we're going to write that in one sentence. So this is all about the cost. The cost of renting a kayak includes you can say a base fee or an initial fee of $25 plus an additional $12 per hour. Okay, so there's a base cost or initial cost of $25, okay, and then an additional $12 an hour. So again, when you're doing this on your own, you're welcome to organize like this and then write it. Or if you can go right from here to writing that, that is fine. Okay, I just want to show you how the y-intercept and the slope are going to relate to our interpretation in context. Okay, and then we're going to do one more interpretation problem. It's the format's a little bit different. Okay, so this is about rainfall, and it says at 1 p.m. a meteorologist records a total rainfall of 11.5 millimeters for the day. So at 1 p.m. there's the 11.5 millimeters. After continued rain, the total rainfall at 5 p.m. is 16.7 millimeters. Okay, and then we are going to define variables to represent the situation. Okay, so when you guys are starting this, okay, you can always start with your sentences with let X represent, let Y represent. Okay, so we can define our variables as X and Y. And remember that X is going to be your input, Y is going to be your output. Okay, so based on what they're giving us the time of day, and they're giving us the amount of rainfall. Okay, so what we want to do here is we want to estimate the amount of rainfall based on the time of day. So you are going to have to analyze your situation to figure out what we're trying to do here. So if we want to estimate the amount of rainfall based on the time of day, okay, what is X going to represent? What is going to be your input? So that's going to be the number of hours. As the rain falls. Okay, and then the Y is going to represent the total amount of rain in millimeters. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to turn these into points. Okay, so it starts at 1 p.m. and it's 11.5. So we can write this as a point. Okay, so at 1 p.m. starts at 1 p.m. Output is 11.5. I think it's easier for you to think of this in terms of a point. And so we're going to do 11.5 and then 5, 16.7. Okay, so at 1 p.m., 11.5. At 5 p.m., we're 16.7. And when you are calculating your slope is always just the change in Y over the change in X. Have you guys seen it written like this before with the little delta? Yeah, okay, yay, yeah. So the delta is like your change in that. In geometry and algebra 1, you probably talked about y2 minus 1 over x2 minus x1. Yep, the change in those values. Okay, so then we can think of this first point as the x1, y1, your second point as your x2, y2, and we're going to plug that in. Okay, so we're going to do 16.7 minus 11.5 over 5 minus 1. Okay, so when you're subtracting decimals, you can just line them up. So what's 7 minus 5? 2, so it's just 0.2. 16 minus 11, 5, divided by 4. And then we talked about this the other day, right? When you have a decimal, when you're dividing, you can just do 52 divided by 4 and then move it back. Okay, so if you have 52 divided by 4, right, you just move the decimal. How many times does 4 go into 5? 1 time. Oh, or you can just put the dot here and it doesn't even matter, which some of you might like better. How many times does 4 go into 12? 3, so it's 1.3. Okay, so this is going to be your slope. Okay, so if it starts at 1 p.m. and your starting place is 11.5, this is going to be your y-intercept. Okay, and then we calculated our slope. So our equation is going to be y equals 1.3x plus 11.5. Okay, now based on that, we're going to go to part C. And we're writing an equation. So we found the slope, we found the y-intercept, we wrote our equation. Now we're going to estimate the total rainfall for the day at 10 p.m. if it continues to fall at this rate. Okay, now what's a little bit confusing is when we're doing this, we started at 1 p.m. and what would you plug in for x so that your starting value was 11.5? What would you have to plug in to get that? You have to plug in 0. So at 1 p.m., your x value is 0, so that your starting value is 11.5. So you would have to plug in 0 in order to get that as your start. Okay, which means at 2 p.m., you would plug in x is equal to 1 in order to get your y value. At 3 p.m., you'd have to plug in x is 2, okay? So, based on this pattern, at 10 p.m., what would your x value be? Yes, okay? So the equation that we set up is based on the information that we have. So they started it at 1 p.m., okay? So we had to use that in order to find our equation. Okay, so when I'm solving, I'm just going to plug in to my equation that x is 9, 1.3 times 9 plus 11.5. All right, let's talk about how to multiply this quickly without your calculator. All we have to do is 1 times 9. What's 1 times 9? Yay. What's 3 times 9? 27. So because you have a decimal moved one place, all you have to do is move it back. So if 3 times 9 is 27, 0.3 times 9 is 2.7. Okay? And then you're just going to add those together. So what's 9 plus 2.7? Yep. So we're going to do 11.7 plus 11.5. So that's what we're doing here. And then 0.2 carry the 1. 11 and 11, you know, is 22, so it's just going to be 23. Okay, so your final answer is going to be 23.2 millimeters. How are we doing? Oh, this one here? Yes. Absolutely can. Alright, so then let's do point slope form. Do you guys remember the equation for point slope form? Yeah. Yes, yes, yes. Great. Okay, and that is where x1, y1 is a point. On the line. Okay, and your book also says like m is the slope, but I feel like you know that, right? Okay, so we are going to write an equation in point slope form for a line that satisfies each of the conditions. Okay, now a lot of times people think this is too simple and they want to go further. You do not have to go further. Okay, all we're going to do is we're going to plug in m, we're going to plug in x1, we're going to plug in y1. Okay, that's all we have to plug in here. So if I'm using this, okay, it's y minus 8 equals 0. And then x minus negative 2. The only thing you have to do is simplify this. If you have minus a negative, you're going to leave the 0. You're not going to distribute that. You're going to leave it in point slope form. Okay, so you're going to leave it just like that. Okay, so based on A, can you guys go ahead and do B? Okay, double check your sign. So you should have y plus 2 is equal to 3/8 x minus 16. Okay, and yes, that is all you have to do for those. Okay, just leave them in point slope form. All right, now sometimes they want you to write an equation in point slope form, and the line's going to pass through the set of points. Okay, so the first thing you're going to have to do is find the slope. Okay, so to find your slope, we're going to use y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay, and again, I like to label my x1, y1. It just helps me when I'm plugging it in. Okay, as long as you're showing your work, just do what works best for you. Okay, because this could be your x2, y2, and this could be x1, y1. That doesn't matter. So I have 9 minus negative 7, which is going to turn into plus. 3 minus 13 minus negative 3, which again is going to turn into plus. And then you always need to reduce. So 16 divided by 16 is 1. Okay, so we find the slope, and then we're going to put in point slope form. All right, and then when you're putting it in point slope form, you actually have two options. So if you use the first point, then you would have y minus negative 7, which turns into plus 7, and then 1 x plus 3. Or if you use point 2, you have y minus 9 equals 1 x minus 13. Okay, so you can decide. You don't have to write down both. Okay, so you can choose point 1 or 2. All right, so go ahead and do part B for me. And you can start going over the story problems if you finish that. Okay, remember whenever you have a negative divided by a negative, it will be a positive, so your slope should be 4. Okay, and then you should either have y minus 6 equals 4 times x plus 3, or you can have y plus 2 equals 4 times x plus 5. Okay, you don't have to write down both of them when you're doing your homework. You can choose which one. Again, it's just based on your point. Okay, so for our next story problem, talking about subs, a popular sandwich shop sold 174 subs by 8 p.m. and then by 10 p.m. it sold 290 sandwiches. Okay, write an equation in point slope form that represents the number of sandwiches the shop sold after it opened at 5 p.m. Okay, so in this case, 5 p.m. is going to be our start time. Okay, and then when we're defining our variables, we want x to be the time in hours from the start at 5 p.m. Okay, so 6 p.m. would be 1 hour, 7 p.m. 2 hours, so on and so forth. Okay, y is the output, and that's going to be the number of subs that you make, so we'll just put subs. So just like we did on our earlier example, we want to state what our values are. So at 8 p.m., if the time from the start is 5 to 8 is how many hours? 3, so that after 3 hours, 174 subs were sold. By 10 p.m., how many hours have passed? 5. Okay, so then we can find our slope from here. Okay, so we're going to do 290 minus 174 over 5 minus 3. We know the bottom is going to be 2. Okay, the subtraction you can set up however you want. I like to set it up old school, right? So this would be 10, it's a 6, I borrowed, so I get a 1. So I have 116. I just need to cut that in half. What's half of 100? 50, half of 16. Put them together. 58. Okay, so this is going to be like your 58 subs per hour is what they're making. Okay, so again, you have two choices. You can either use the first point and you'd have y minus 174 equals 58 times x minus 3. Or if you use the second point, okay, and again, you only have to write one of those. So both of those are going to be correct. All right, and then let's write your homework we'll write your homework at the top of this, okay? So it is on page 97. So these are kind of scattered just because I only wanted to give you a couple of each type. But these are short, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13,